Hi, Steve Stahlberg here with pinup number 47, made in Kuala Lumpur, November 2017. This one started with Edmund Blair Leighton's The Accolade. What you can see here. Notice how this painting is centered on the man rather than the woman. Like his head is in the center. His head is better lit, and he's got more detail in his costume, and he's wearing red. He's just visually more important in the scene than she is, in my opinion anyway. It's almost like he thinks he's saying the night is more important. I wanted to change that. I wanted to make a version of this, quite a different version of this. I wanted to make it different in a few ways. I wanted to make the queen more important for one thing, but also to reverse racial roles. Like instead of this situation here where you have like it's all white people and blonde and dressed in white, and of course it's medieval Europe, so what do you expect? But still, it's I wanted to make something different. So what if Africa had developed faster than Europe? What if Europe had been hit much harder, for instance, by the Black Plague or something like that? Or populated much later in the Neolithic? Or, an alternate history where Africa and Europe reversed roles, basically. I know it's been done before. I wanted to try it also. Part of the inspiration for this was also this, when I googled for African queens, I found Franz Menzig's beautiful pin-up here, which became another inspiration. So, enough explanation of what I was thinking. I start sketching. As usual, empty layer over an intermediate tone. In this case a fairly dark tone, because I was going for a little bit more darkness than Leighton's original painting. And this one was quite an epic one in the way that it was quite a lot of work for me, more work than normal. So it might be a bit long, so I might have to skip ahead a little bit here and there. We'll see. It's a bit hard to see right here also. Not a lot of contrast between the lines and the background. I had an idea to have some maids, maids in waiting, holding up her huge cape. That she should have a huge cape in the first place, because it's made of gold, and the bigger it is, the more rich and powerful you are, and even if it wasn't made of gold, a huge cape that you need help to drag around, it just instantly indicates that you have some kind of power in society. I kind of picture the Africans here as a well-meaning, similar to what the whites were doing in the beginning in Africa, before the what they call it, the dash for Africa started. Originally, when they came down there, and they weren't expecting to find as much riches as they later found, and that's when they all turned into robber barons down there. But in the beginning there was some sense of doing something beneficial for the African people, like you know, that's annoying in itself, you know, we're going to take care of you because you're children, but I wanted to reverse that also. I wanted to give that impression here, that she's a beneficial ruler, or a benevolent ruler, sorry, or she tries to be anyway. She thinks she is, and it's just I was just switching out the top layer of medieval society for this different type of culture that came in and started ruling. And the reason they're ruling is they have better tech, they have some steam power, or you'll see later. I'll talk about that later. But yeah, this is the first base layers that I'm blocking in. You can see here on the edge here, the queen gets one layer for all the skin, basically, and then gold of the queen gets another layer, not the cape. The cape is separated beneath the queen layer for obvious reasons. So girls in the back, the cape, and the guy on the same layer, because they're not touching each other, so they can be on the same layer. The queen and the gold, and then the sketch here up top. Later you'll see I add another sketch layer, another more refined sketch layer. This here I'm just googling and researching the colors of gold and sort of merging my favorites together into one image, which I kept on the side and used as a palette for color picking. And then I'll start painting. First I try to find the intermediate color, which makes it easier if you can do that. I had a base color in the beginning, but that was basically just to be able to see it, and what I did here was actually try to get the intermediate color for gold, and so now I can fill in the highlights and the darks. And the thing about gold is that it doesn't have a huge range, especially crinkly gold foil type thing. This is supposed to be gold leaf that she has attached to her body, which is possible because gold leaf is so thin that it becomes almost sticky. It sticks to everything it touches, basically. So, and she has so much of, they're so rich, she's so rich that she doesn't care if some of the gold keeps flaking off here and there as she walks around. She keeps repairing it, she keeps putting on, her servants keep putting on more gold on her all day long, so she's rich. But the thing about painting this textured surface is that it will catch a lot of light. Gold is very reflective, and so there won't be a lot of AO, there won't be a lot of ambient occlusion, like there won't be a lot of dark spots. Instead what will happen is you get these hot spots, like warm, you see it's kind of greenish most of it, then you get these spots where it's kind of reddish, and that's where on a normal material, on a matte material, you might expect to see dark shadows here, but these are the crevices where gold reflects gold, bouncing from one side to the other. So it becomes warmer there, redder, and you don't have a lot of black, you don't have a lot of dark shadows anywhere. And then the other thing about gold, as a metal, the highlights will be more saturated than the other colors, like intermediate or shadow or whatever. So once you follow those couple of simple rules, once you get the initial color right, which I did by googling, and once you get those other couple of rules that I just mentioned right, it's not too hard to render gold, actually. Shouldn't be. If you keep getting it wrong, just go back and see, you know, which of the rules are you breaking, because you probably are at that stage. So yeah, I started painting the guy here. I painted her gold leaf areas with a very rough brush because, you know, it's crinkled up. later. I'll smooth it out a little bit later, but I think it saves a lot of time to get that a lot of that roughness in from the start. This guy will get proper armor later. I changed my mind a little bit. Right now he's clothed like he has a cuirass of metal here and then some soft cloth here, which I changed a little bit. See, right now I'm working on the background there, the stone step. And of course the queen has a sword, which she's actually knighting the guy, just like in the accolade. The queen is knighting the knight. So here I'm working on the girls. You see that the drawing isn't matching the cutout, the blocked in shape. So sometimes when I'm blocking in, I kind of just change the drawing on the fly, and it's I don't detail these girls too much more than this. I'm putting some clothing on them. It's not really clothing, it's like decoration. It's I'm not sure what you'd call it. It's just a bit of body ornament. Because you know, the dynasty is so rich that they have enough gold they can put it on their servants, all over their servants. And even they're kind of showcasing, like, look, even my servants are 1,000 times richer than your upper class out there. You know, that's the kind of thing that rich people do, I guess. And I don't know if you noticed, but obviously you have to keep the gold in the background has to be less saturated than the gold in the foreground. So I'm trying to be very careful with not blowing out the highlights with super strong yellows. And even the intermediate tone, which I started with, it's slightly darker than the one in the foreground. It's all got to do with what lighting you decide. If you had decided to put stronger lights in the background, then that would have been reversed. But I was imagining the stronger lights to be hitting the stuff in the foreground in this one. Maybe I should jump a little bit more. Close up on their faces. I'm doing that thing I do with the auto contrast and the curves and a bit of hue saturation. And then another thing I do a lot is moving stuff around, like cut and paste, copy paste. And while I'm doing all that stuff, I'm not concerned too much about creating seam lines and cut lines and stuff. I try to catch them later, but I find it a bit distracting to have to worry about that at the same time as I'm trying to take the wider view and trying to push things into position. It's just two different ways of looking at it. One is you have to have the microscopic view and look closer, and I don't like jumping between those or doing that at the same time as the other. And one is you have the wider view. So what I do is I take the wider view first, and then I worry about the micro stuff later. You know. I'll try to anyway. The last 10% is you spend a lot of time on the last sort of 10 or 5% of the painting, where I just sit and stare at it for hours and just go from wide view to close-up view to wide view. Let's see what's next. Back to the Queen, and what's coming up next is I'm going to make a foil-like texture on an overlay for this gold leaf. And I keep saying foil because that's what I had to search for. Gold leaf it's a little bit too fine of a texture to probably even show up from this distance. So the thicker kind of texture created by foil that is wrinkled is like this you see here. I've already sampled some and copied it across a larger area like this. And now what I'm doing now is I'm just sort of trying to merge it all together and make sure that you don't see a repeating pattern. You will see a bit of a repeating pattern, but I'm trying to remove some of that and even it out a bit, and trying to make it more like the vision I have of how foil should crinkle. A little bit of sharpening there as well, and then put it on top as an overlay. And now all I have to do is just go in and select the empty area on the gold layer, and then jump to the foil overlay and then just hit delete. So you select here, make sure you catch all the little holes like that. You know, you unclick contiguous when you do the selection, and then you jump to the other layer and hit delete. So that gave me a little problem later. I had to, when I made an adjustment to the golden just the color layer, the gold color layer, I had to also go back to this overlay layer and move that as well. But it's no big deal, you know. You can do that easily with clone or copy paste. You know, what I'm doing now is I'm working on the face, of course, drawing a face first on another layer. This became later my second sketch layer, and refining the edges. I have some bluish light coming in from the right hand side of the image. Almost like rim light, not quite rim light, it's glancing from the side, but not quite a rim. Adding some golden details here. See, when I draw the neck where it should be, I see that it's not attaching to the body in the right place, so I'm going to have to move this whole head to the right a little bit like that. Now here I've drawn in a different type of headgear, so I delete the first version I made, and now I'm working on the new headgear, which is a kind of gas flame. Which I wanted to give her something that looked like a halo. I came across my Facebook feed a fashion image with a white woman wearing something like this, made of gold colored halo, with her hair sprayed to sit in the similar way that these flames are going to be. So I thought, well, we have like a steampunk, diesel punk kind of technology here. They have gunpowder and maybe steam powder, power, sorry, and that's why they vanquished the Europeans in the medieval times. So yeah, I thought that could be cool. She has this halo. She walks around like she's a saint, almost a Christian saint, or maybe, yeah, maybe they borrowed this idea of the Christian saint from the people they conquered, just to impress them, to make them feel more conquered, to make them feel more inferior so that they can look more superior, or maybe it comes from a different source. I don't know, but I just like this idea of her having almost like an Olympic flame on top of her head. And this is really a tricky part right here. I'm reading my notes here. Yeah, it's gas powered, so it's a gas flame. You saw that image. I used the gas flame to here I'm copying them and changing them a little bit. I used a gas flame from the internet as a reference, and the tricky part is to balance the blue here with the yellow so that it doesn't turn green, and it does turn a little green during the intermediate stages here, but I think I fixed it. That was one of the many things that I worked on and fixed towards the end. Here I'm sort of just painting generic flame bits. I guess the trick to this is to use a variable pressure brush, so that the pen pressure controls the width of the brush. Otherwise it's a very plain brush, normal, simple brush. And then a little bit of darker colors here. So as you can see right now, there's a bit too much yellow all over the place. So I'm using the fade feature there again. Some darker parts. And what I'm about to do next is I'm going to add a white layer, which I'm going to pull down to very faint, not very high opacity, to be able to see through her skin, to be able to see the black lines, because the skin is fairly dark right here. So that's just a temporary measure to be able to see the sketch lines better, and then I'll start painting her face a bit more resolution. And you can see this halo here has a crappy construction right now. Later I'm going to fix that also by going in and using good old construction technology to figure out sketch lines on top, construction lines, and then ellipses and straight lines to construct how it's supposed to be looking. And here you can see everything is a bit whiter now. That's this layer right here, white layer, which is set to, I don't know, 10%, 15%, something. And then I'm drawing underneath there on with full black, which doesn't look full black because it's covered by the white. See, I switch it off there and it becomes difficult to see, so but I switched off temporarily here just to fill in some intermediate tones here. I wanted to keep her skin really dark, like not just a bland sort of. She represents Africa, and she's like, to these people, the blacker you are, the more African you are, the more, I don't know. Well, she's also very beautiful, so that's another thing why she's considered to be almost like a superhero to these people. But yeah, black is beautiful to them, to me too, but I mean I'm just talking about this alternate history we have here. But the difficulty you get in then is to actually paint it, you know, legibly, so that you can see her features. So since she is beautiful, I wanted to also see her, but in certain lighting situations she might end up like just a solid black, and I didn't want that, so that's partly why I have this bluish light coming in from the side. And you can see I also tried to have some subtle. The gold is also doing a disfavor. It is actually masking. If you make the gold too bright here, I wanted it to be a big contrast between the gold and her skin, but still, if the contrast had been too much, the lighter you make the gold, the darker her skin will look, and it's almost like the gold blinds your eye and makes it difficult to see her. So yeah, a little bit of a balance I had to strike there also. You can see here I'm trying not to go to black, to full black on the gold anywhere. And I think I didn't, but I know I did go a little darker than this in some places, but trying to keep it 99% this kind of intermediate color here, close to that. Later I closed her eyelids more, because right now she's looking over the top of the head of the guy, which is down here, and that's wrong, of course. She has to be looking down at him, so I lowered the eyelids. Here I had moved the golden part of the gold, and now I also had to move the overlay part of the gold, which, as you can see, is fairly quick and easy to do. Just clone it in there. And right now I'm making adjustments to the color layer of the gold. Jump ahead a little bit. Detailing the gold. And here I'm constructing the halo better, like I said. So the ellipse, the line tool, find the center line, find the center point, and then create this construction that would seem to sit in the proper place, attached to the proper place on her head, and be symmetrical. Playing with some nice different types of effects, like fade, just simple airbrushed, fading them in and out, just seeing what looks cool. Adding a bit of a detail with the center line down each one, and then I decided to make her helmet black except for a strip of gold at the bottom of the helmet. So that's what I'm doing here now, darkening it first, but then of course it's too reddish, so it needs to not look like gold. I was thinking like enamel, like very shiny black paint, and for that to happen I needed to get rid of the warm color which was still coming through in the highlights, so I blued them up here and blued everything up, and then right at the end here I put back some really hot highlights, which is, in my mind, that is the fire reflecting off the edge of the polished black part of the helmet. And then just some retouching of the gold parts. This is the kind of thing, these tiny little things I'm doing here now, that's the kind of thing that takes up most of the time at the end. Tiny changes. But there's many of them and they all add up. Added some, I imagine these cords to be stretchy so that they are more practical to use. Otherwise you'd have to walk around using the exact same pose all the time. She couldn't turn her spine, she couldn't bend her spine less or more. But if they have a slight spring to them, that could work. That part is borrowed from Franz Menzing's chin-up. Also the fact that she's wearing nothing but gold, but that was also part of my original idea, that Africa had so much natural resources, gold for instance, that they just bathe in it almost. Especially the upper class. I wanted to try some gold fakes, which could be partially the gold leaf has separated into tiny little bits, which happens. If you keep smearing it, if you keep putting it on, applying it, and it falls off, and you apply it and it falls off, eventually it almost turns into a liquid, so that you have almost like golden powder brushed on to your skin, or paint. But I also imagine they actually they have a bottle of sprinkles that they add here and there on purpose, like makeup. And later I put gold on her hands, on her hand as well, on her fingers. And now I'm doing the armor for the guy. Decided he wasn't looking knightly enough. Yeah, looks more like a page or something. So yeah, I gotta make him look more exciting and knightly. Not much to say about that. As usual, I'm starting with an intermediate color, the grey here, and then adding the darks and the lights on top of that. It's a bit too small right now, so I'm going to be stretching this particular piece of armor with using warp. I added some drop shadow right there that I didn't need to, but never mind that. It's easy to put back. Yeah, that's what I meant to do from the start. Made it too small. I like that deformation tool, the warp, and I like all the deformation tools. Skew, scale, perspective, liquefy. They make it so I don't have to repaint everything 5 times, which I hate. Well, nearly done now. I'm sorry it's been so long. This image did take much longer than usual to create. I'm going to jump a little bit here. after this, there's just the background that I worked on, and you will see me doing a pillar. You'll first see me doing I put some texture into the background, which is basically like Egyptian hieroglyphics. I just imagined Egypt being at the north of Africa would be the culture that would be closest to Europe, physically closer to Europe. And also I imagined that Egypt, I hope nobody takes offense to this in any way, like Egyptians or Africans or present day, people inhabiting these areas. It's not meant to be offensive in any way. It's just a wild fantasy, and I had to decide, if I was gonna have like Kenya or Madagascar or South Africa or whatever. I just decided to pick the Egyptian culture as the one that is in this particular image. So yeah, this is detailing of the guy, but after this you'll see me put some hieroglyphics on the wall in the background, and then I make a pillar, much like Frank Rosetta's image, famous image with the Egyptian queen, or whatever it's called, with a leopard and that stuff. But that pillar is quite different. But I admit I was inspired. I think it's just yeah, these are the hieroglyphics I put in there. Here's the pillar. First you start with one side and then you copy it to the other. It makes it really easy to make it symmetrical. And then after that, using some references, I painted in designs. Very rough at this stage. Painting in some designs. The horizon level is right about here, so that the ellipses will be straight. Actually right there, yeah. So anything above there will be increasingly more circular ellipses, and anything below would be increasingly more circular in the opposite direction. It's a bit off, it's a bit rough, but I fixed that later by zooming in and by using the Photoshop ellipse tool to straighten everything out. Refining it with selections, with the circular selection tool. It's really awesome to do that. After this it'll be finished. Adding a highlight on another level to be able to more easily change it later. Yeah, see, so the thing about pillars is they're circular and round, so they catch light in a nice way. They catch light much nicer. This is the finished one. More nicely than a flat wall like this, for instance. Or even a corner of a squared off piece of architecture. So, and I made the floor a bit more reflective, as you can see. I just basically refined everything. You can see I put the gold leaf on the hand as well there. I added some more cracks in the gold leaf here and there. It looks a bit thick right now. It's supposed to be very, very thin, so she can move. There's no problem moving. Perhaps I should have added more cracks to it here and there. Gold leaf on a white person doesn't do much. It doesn't look like much because you can hardly see the difference between the gold and the skin. But gold leaf on a black person, that really is a nice thing. Well, that's it. Finally done. As you see, I copied this pillar to another one here. It's a bit long, a bit taller, but I just used that same pillar twice. Hope you like it. Thanks for your support, and see you next month.